Welcome to the SNF Spotlight Series, your one-stop shop to find out what's really going on in SNFs nationwide. I'm your host, Yitz Rubin, and this is sponsored by Renewal Rehab, the best therapy provider for SNFs nationwide. Chelsea Gurgone, the Director of Rehab with Renewal Rehab for 7 years already. More than one facility now at Joliet. So tell me about your traumatic brain injury as a teenager and how that made you more empathetic to dealing with elderly.
When I was 17, I was in a motor vehicle accident. So I was ejected from the vehicle and sustained a very, very bad brain injury. So I went through about a year of occupational, physical, and speech therapy, and that really sparked my interest in becoming a therapist. So that's what got me started. I originally started working in hospital with traumatic brain injuries and spinal cord injuries, and it just hit way too close to home for me. It was hard to deal with still having my repercussions of my accident and then also having to treat people with that. So I kind of completely switched gears and went to the elderly population, and I just love it. I still get to see traumatic brain injuries, but in a different way.
Wow. So you were the driver, the passenger?
I was not. I was a passenger.
So can you tell me more about that experience? What happened over there?
Yeah, so I was going to work with a few of my girlfriends, and the driver lost control of the vehicle. And then I was ejected out of the back window and landed, I think they said 75 yards away from the car. So I'm so fortunate that I'm here and we all survived. Someone was really watching out for us that day.
Wow, that must have been crazy. So tell me about joining Renewal 2014 and balancing the working mom life.
I had just had my first daughter. She was about 6 months old, and I put my application out there, and I was hired in 2014 and just started as needed. I worked PRN in a few of the buildings, and then I had a job offer to fill in for the director. I filled in for her and then eventually worked my way up to a permanent director spot.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And how is it working with Renewal?
It's wonderful. I have great regional boss. I have great role models throughout the whole company, but my favorite thing is that they definitely always put family first.
And do you feel like being a mom, does that help you be more efficient and more compassionate with the residents?
Most definitely. I feel like as a mom, you kind of just get that nurturing aspect, and it's easy to relate to the families that are really struggling with their loved ones in the facility too.
You're taking care of your children, you're taking care of the elderly. Mm-hmm. How would you compare that?
It's very similar. I always think of things that I get to do with my kids to watch them develop and shape them to be more independent. And then it's very similar with the elderly. We're kind of retraining them to be as independent as possible, to keep their independence. So it's really similar.
Was there a time you questioned working?
Most definitely. I'd definitely say the beginning of the pandemic was extremely hard for not only me, but I'm sure every working mom out there. My daughter's school was shut down, daycare was shut down. I had no option, and that was a really big struggle for me. A couple months in, daycare finally opened back up, and I had to make that choice too, to send my kids back to daycare and be exposed every day, just like I was going to be. But I knew also it's very important that they have the therapy that they need, because without us, and now their families aren't allowed in to see them, we're the only ones they have right now. So
tell me about your passion for OT and how you've developed that.
So my passion for OT originally started when I had the brain injury. When I was younger, I always wanted to be a nurse. I definitely was always interested in science and then caring for people. But after sustaining a brain injury, my occupational therapist in the hospital really talked me into, you should venture out and look at therapy instead of nursing. And I did. And I completely fell in love with teaching people to regain their independence.
So is there like a story that sticks out about how you taught a senior and gave them more independence?
One of my favorite stories is someone that called me a few days ago and said, "This is Sally, I don't know if you remember me," and it clicked right away in my brain. I remembered exactly who she was, and she said, "You helped me learn how to walk again and get in and out of bed." And she's like, "You know, you were always so nice to me and so kind." And so it's always nice when we hear stories like that.
Do you ever have to show like tough love? Like, is there ever a challenge like, hey, I know this person needs to do this?
Yeah, every day. Especially when you're working with the elderly population. You know, some of the people are in their 80s and 90s and they've done something a certain way their entire lives. So now we have to show them a different way. It's definitely very challenging.
Do you share your personal story with your patients and the residents and how you recovered?
Absolutely. One of the biggest things that people say is like, "You have no idea what I'm going through." And it's nice for me to really look them in the eye and say, "Yes, I do. I've been in your shoes. You know, this is what happened to me." And because of therapy, because I worked really hard, you know, I got to, you know, be a fully functioning adult in the community now.
Wow. So how long did it take you to recover?
I would say a full year. They sent me home without a bone in my head. So I was missing half of my skull. And then a month later, I had to go back in and have my bone flap replaced. And then I was in occupational therapy for about a year.
Yeah, so Chelsea, wow, you have a fascinating story.
Thanks.
It's extremely interesting how also it developed your career, that one story. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on to the Sniff Spotlight.
Thanks for having me.
It was really a pleasure.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing this tremendously important part of senior care. The Sniff Spotlight series highlights healthcare heroes and thought leaders in the skilled nursing community. We're building awareness, trust, and shining the light on SNFs. So stay tuned. Remember to like, comment, and share.